It's really easy to think that you're solving a real problem and to create a solution that's looking for a problem. And you can convince yourself that a problem exists. And if you ask people if that problem exists in their life, oftentimes they'll tell you the answer is yes. But the reality is that if someone hasn't cared enough about a problem to go try to find a solution for themselves, there's a good chance it's not actually a problem for them.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And you know what problem just came up with me, Camden? I did not do the alignment check. And I'm sitting here looking, you don't
look crooked.
Behind the scenes at the 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis, little open the kimono. We got three things, we got our good friend Charlie in one screen, Cam and me in two separate screens. And then there's a center line. Mm-hmm. The center line is off. And if that center line is off,
just start the whole day over.
Can't, it's like when I look over at the blinds, if they ain't parallel, I got to go over and fix them. Don't be sloping them. They're either open or closed, right? Closed.
Open. Oh, yeah.
Parallel, right?
Gonna power through. Oh yeah. You got it.
No, I can't power through that. I can power through a lot of things in life. Misalignment ain't one of them. Yeah, that's probably why my back is screwed up. I keep trying to align things. I don't know.
The real alignment was inside you all the time.
Huh?
That spinal alignment. The real alignment was inside you the whole time,
Yeah, well, and now we're getting deep.
Well, there we go. Now that there's bolts in it, it's aligned. Does that count as artificial alignment, or is that for real?
Yeah. Up to the doctor, I guess.
Yeah. Charlie, our good friend, and thanks for carving out some time and coming back, Charlie. What would you say?
193 3 years ago.
Yeah, 193. Folks, if you want to do a before and after picture, go back to episode 193, and our good friend Charlie join us. Charlie, when you look down at your desk, are things in alignment? I mean, my desk has some fake stripes on it, and guess what? Things got to be aligned with those stripes. Is your desk that way?
My desk is always like a perfect representation of the amount of chaos in my brain. And so it gets really chaotic, and then I have to do like a reorganization of everything. And then that brings me peace, and then I feel good. So where are
you at in the chaos spectrum right now?
I'm actually pretty good right now. Yeah. We came out of the holidays. The holidays always get, busy for us. And, that's when the papers start to pile up and the files that haven't been filed actually, start to stack up. We've got a lot of books around our office, but I've actually got like some good balance right now around me. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. But I agree. Yeah. If the blinds are crooked, it's a no-go from me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how folks do it, Camden. By the way,
I'm just thinking about my old jacked up house built in 47 and how nothing in here is on a right angle or anything. So I really can't. I could not be picky.
It was hard for me to visit, believe me. Yeah. So
you don't like how there's 3 additions and they all go up about 3 inches halfway through each room? You don't like that?
No.
Cam, I did notice before we started, one of the hats behind you was missing, and that was going to drive me crazy. If
I got that hat. I'm good at that part.
In that tapestry behind you. So on behalf of your dad and me, thank you for putting that hat up.
Hey, shout out to Reed Park Zoo there. Yeah.
I love it.
Yep. Well, and just a heads up, Camden, I'm coming to visit in a couple of weeks. Make sure
ain't going to be level. I ain't fixing it.
So, in talking about alignment, Charlie, man, business is doing well. And what I'm excited about is when we were talking last time, I think we were just like slightly beyond the ideation, kind of we're thinking about, we got a beta, we're kind of going to market. You were kind of in that stage. Now, I'm gonna put words in your mouth, but you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. And you're in scaling mode. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, what's that feel like when you look back and go, holy crap, and you see where you are today? What's that feeling like for you?
I mean, it's pretty amazing to reflect on the journey that we've been on. The reality is that the problems never get smaller as you grow your business. The problems actually almost always get bigger. So it doesn't feel any easier now than it was back then. But I remember, when we were talking last, we were very much, I would say, very clear about the problem we were trying to solve. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to figure out a solution based on all the customers that we were talking to that would actually be a solution that would fundamentally address the problem that people were expressing they were experiencing to us. Mm-hmm. And so to know that today we're in a place where we built a product that directly solves that problem and people are using it and it's having impact. Yeah, it's massively gratifying as a mission-driven founder building a mission-driven business.
Looking back on that, because that's my memory on it, going back through watching a little bit of that episode, was this like, it's a really, really cool thing. You're addressing this amazing problem. You're helping a lot of folks. And then there was this whole like, crap, I got to build a business on top of it thing. Mm. How did you start to shift gears into that and get more into the business? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we want to solve problems. And so you had the good solution, but you didn't know how to build the business model behind it there. What was that process?
Let me pause you though. Let's say what the business is, so folks ain't guessing. Let's do that, Charlie. Tell us the business name and what problem you're solving, because I know everybody's like, "Damn, would you just get to the point? What the hell does Charlie do?"
We could talk abstractly for the next 45 minutes. Yeah, the company is called
drop it at the end and walk away, right?
Yeah, or maybe it'll be a quiz. You'll have to guess what the company is. It's called Remento. It's like the words remember and memento combined into one. And we are trying to help families preserve the memories and stories of aging relatives in a way that doesn't require any work for the families. So our product creates keepsake memory books, kind of akin to a memoir, that completely write themselves. So no writing for mom or grandma. She ends up with a book full of her memories that features QR codes that when you scan will lead directly to the recording that was used to write that chapter. So, Cam, to answer your question, going way back, we knew very clearly the problem we wanted to solve from the beginning. And it was rooted in something we were hearing time and again from customers that we would speak with at the time, not yet customers, which was, there's someone in my life who I would give anything to be able to hear their voice one more time. And if I could hear them say anything, it would be talking about the moments that shaped their life, the big moments and the little moments. And for me, I lost my dad at a young age, and I knew that feeling really well. There were so many times throughout, my life as a young kid, more recently becoming a dad, where I'd give anything to be able to ask him a question about what it was like bringing me home from the hospital, or what his childhood was like, the moments that shaped him, what it was like getting to know my mom. And it was why when my mom got diagnosed with lung cancer, we decided to sit down and record an oral history interview of her. And that experience was really eye-opening for me for a couple of reasons. The first was the amount of work that it took, figuring out what I was going to ask, how I was going to record it, what to do with the recordings.
Yeah, you can't just say, "Hey, Mom, tell me about your life." You can't just.
No, you can, and it's awkward. You can, but if you did, it's an awkward thing to do on a Tuesday. Right. But the reality is that in our case, because my mom had been diagnosed with what we believed to be a terminal illness, it made sense to do it. We had a reason. And it ultimately led to one of the most important experiences our family had ever had, which was learning things about her that we didn't even know we could learn about because we had never made the time to ask. And so I left those conversations feeling, really surprised. Like, why had it taken my mom getting cancer for me to go ahead and ask these questions? And what if technology could help make it easier to sit down with someone you love, whether it was physically or virtually, and be able to record the kinds of conversations that in the future you'll be glad to have, but in the present you'll be glad to learn. And so, Camden, to answer your question, we started off with that problem statement, and we knew that before we were going to build a business around anything, we had to build a product that would solve that need. And so when we talked last, we were iterating around that, and we built a bunch of different products, and all of them were really exciting and none of them worked. And so right around the time that OpenAI released their first model that would be accessible to small teams, we jumped on it and we built an AI first storytelling company that would effectively interview a mom, a dad, a grandparent every week for a year and turn all of the recordings into the kinds of content you'd want to have actually printed in a book. So it looks a lot more like a biographer wrote it than just a transcript of a conversation. And so once we built that product and we realized that there was commercial demand, then the business model wrote itself, right? Because we knew that there was something that we had built that was valuable, and all we had to do was find a way to be able to make sure that we could cover the costs of scaling this to as many people as possible.
Talking about the problem solving there, I think you have a unique example of something that I think a lot of businesses face, which is that you can have something that can be really, really useful, but people have trouble getting out of that reactive headspace, right? When it comes to the problem solving of like, hey, that's a wonderful thing to say right now, but we wait till bad things happen before we start to make those kind of life choices. Could you talk some about like the framing of that problem to try to get people to shift to that more proactive mindset? Because I think that key shift there from reactive to proactive is something that I think a lot of businesses face.
Well, I think you're right. It's really easy to think that you're solving a real problem.
There's a crowd maybe there. Sorry about that, y'all.
That's called life. It's really easy to think that you're solving a real problem and to create a solution that's looking for a problem. And you can convince yourself that a problem exists. And if you ask people if that problem exists in their life, oftentimes they'll tell you the answer is yes. But the reality is that if someone hasn't cared enough about a problem to go try to find a solution for themselves, there's a good chance it's not actually a problem for them. And so what we had to be really careful about is recognizing that the space that we're operating in, most people would tell us they were interested in having a product or service delivered to them in a way that would allow them to make forward progress. If I asked you, would you like to have, Cam, your dad's stories and memories preserved for the future? You'd be heartless to say no. Right? But if I asked you, when was the last time you went about trying to capture your dad's memories and stories? Well, I haven't done that. Well, it turns out it's actually not a problem that has reached a level of urgency that you would take action against. And so for us, what we had to figure out was the way to be able to convince someone like you or someone like your dad to take action on that today. And that's the way that we've built our business, is trying to find ways to make that conversation, that kind of chasm of not realizing this is a problem today to ultimately making forward progress. We've been trying to find a way to inspire people to do exactly that. And that's where the majority of our attention has been in the time since we launched this first product.
That's an awesome problem to have, because, or let me rephrase that. It is a great problem to bring up because so many businesses, I'm thinking the same thing with my other business, Pocket Litter. It solves a problem that people aren't aware about, right? Kind of that same sort of thing. Because then the other thing that you have to deal with is, well, it's not as simple as, well, I've got a problem in my business in shipping. Can you fix that? And if that problem in my business is costing me, $1,000 a month, and you can fix it for $500 a month, then I'm buying anything you're selling that's doing that. When you have a solution to a problem I'm not really aware of, not only do you have to play the education trade-off game, but you have to put it in a price point that's interesting too. Can you talk us through some of that development process? Because I think that's so key to the success that y'all are starting to grab onto.
Well, and just to add the layer to that, and especially with something like you're talking about, like a family member's memories, how the hell you put a price on anything like that? Like, it's very easy for Charlie to go over there and say, well, this is worth thousands and thousands. It doesn't mean anything, right? It's hard to translate.
Until it's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, until it's gone.
Yeah.
So measuring willingness to pay is really interesting in our category. One thing, before I answer your question directly, Otis, I would just share is the distinction between building a business that is being scaled versus being incubated from the onset. It really does. The nature of the problems that you're solving become very different. So, at the beginning, the aperture is so wide that actually the majority of your time is spent defining the problem that you're solving. Right? Einstein would say if he could solve a problem, he would spend 90% of his time focusing on what the problem was and then 10% solving it. Right? Like, we would spend the majority of our time focused on what are we even trying to do for customers? And that was very true of the beginning. We spend a lot of time thinking about that now, but now there's many more constraints in our business that allow us to be, I would say, much more execution oriented. So to your point, how do we ship a product for $500 instead of $1,000? That's a very different problem to solve than how are we going to be able to sell to someone who's never thought about this before, but certainly should, because one day they will and they'll regret not having. So, that's a really interesting kind of change to navigate. And frankly, as an entrepreneur, it's a ton of fun. The piece around pricing, though, is really interesting. And the hack for almost everything that we do in our business related to how we can build a product that is better and ultimately makes more money for our shareholders is by talking to customers. Like it's the simplest way to learn the path forward. And what we can't do is ask customers exactly what solutions we should deliver to them. But again, what we can do is ask them to talk about their life and the times that they've thought about using something. And in our case, how they've used our product. And it's through the conversations with our customers about the way that our product has worked for them or areas that it could work better that we're able to learn what should we build, how should we charge for it, and what value can we create for customers in a way that will keep them coming back and sharing the experience with their friends.
With that, talking about talking with the customers and understanding their insights there and trying to develop those solutions. What were some potential pathways that you ruled out along this journey of hey, we could go solve it this way, we could reshape the product like this? What was something like that you decided not to go down that road with?
I mean, the hardest part about being an entrepreneur is deciding what you're not going to do, right? That's what prioritization is. Bob Iger writes about this in his book. When he got to the Walt Disney Company for the first time, he had something like 7 or 8 priorities. And he hired a political consultant to come in and help him communicate how he was going to set up his first year. And his communications consultant said, you don't have a communication problem. You have a prioritization problem. 7 priorities means you haven't prioritized anything. So pick 3, preferably 2. And if when people hear your priorities, they're not thinking to themselves, wow, there's something that's not on that list, then it's not a list of priorities. And so ruthless prioritization is the name of the game, especially when you're in a resource constrained environment. So every day we have long lists of what are all the things that we wish we could do today, but we're simply not, because there are other things that are either more important or more urgent. So I can give you one really tactical example. We have a lot of customers who have written into us saying, we want Remento to be available in multiple languages, right? The use case for that is clear as day. If you are a first or second generation immigrant who's living in this country or living in a different country, and you haven't been to the place that your parents or your grandparents are from, you don't know what that culture is like, you haven't seen it with your own eyes, perhaps that person that you love doesn't speak the same language as you or doesn't speak the same language natively in the way they would prefer to tell stories. Our product is an opportunity to connect families in a way across generations that's never before been possible. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly difficult every day that we wake up saying we are not prioritizing languages other than English and Spanish right now, not because we don't want to do it, but because what we hear from our customers is that there are other ways that we could serve our current audience that we ought to do before we start prioritize expanding into new audiences. And so that's a really difficult example, because I could make the case day and night about why multiple languages would serve our company, our business, really well. But at the end of the day, we've made the decision that focusing on the core problem that we're trying to solve and doing it in a way that where we can be really focused is ultimately the name of the game.
What, as you've grown, the business has grown, how have you, in the priorities, decided where to build the team as you build that team out? Because that's another big hurdle for entrepreneurs to go from, I got an idea here, Camden, you don't get a choice because you're the son. You have to be part of this idea, but what do we do next? And who do we hire next? And those sort of thoughts and processes that go into where you're at.
I mean, that's been totally a learning journey. And the reality is that anyone who is hired over the last 40 years, frankly, may not be in that much more of an advantaged place than someone who's new at this, given all of the developments and advancements that we're seeing with artificial intelligence and technology. I mean, it is not hyperbolic to say the way that we are building our team is fundamentally different than the way that we would have built our team 5 years ago, frankly, even 6 months ago. And so the reality is that there are certain areas where we know we have to be best in class. And so hiring people who have a lot of experience and skill in things like marketing, things like building technology, things like product development, things like customer support. We're a product first company, so these things are of critical importance to us. The thing that we're spending a ton of time thinking about, though, is what will AI enable our teams to do that they weren't able to do? So it's either going to allow a team that was the same size as it was 5 years ago to do 10 times more, or it creates opportunities for us to have a team that's 1/10 the size of what it would have been 5 years ago. And so we're very much exploring that dynamic. And, what's really fun is building a team with people who are really motivated to realize that AI is not a threat to their job, but it's an incredible accelerant to their capability. And so that's what we're seeing every day. We see customer support teammates on our team who are building automation workflows using AI for our product team.
Did you have to have that conversation with your team? Hey, AI is a asset, not a threat.
We have to have that conversation, every day. And the reality is that if you're an employee working in a company who's thinking that AI is a threat, and you're going to approach that conversation without an open mind as to how it could make you better, it will be something that replaces you. The AI is not going to replace you. What will replace you is someone who's got a more open mindset and is willing to use AI as an accelerant to them. And so everyone for all of time has needed to look to the tools around them to be able to do their job better. And so I would say conceptually, there's nothing that's different about that. The reality, though, is that it's just moving so much faster than it ever has. And so, yeah, to your point, from an organizational change perspective, we had to have a conversation on our team where we made it really clear that we are an AI first company. And if that's something that makes any of our teammates uncomfortable, we understand. But you can't be successful here if you're not willing to operate with that mindset, because as an early stage startup, being nimble and being fast, it's our competitive advantage. And so we need to make sure our team can reflect the disposition that we want to bring to all of the ways that we build.
Talking about that competitive advantage, I think there's also like a clear difference of, and talking about people like having the AI feels like a threat. I think this is why, because there's two different kind of examples for AI, or the main one being that we have a business that's established, a team that is established, and we're trying to cram this tool in, make those adjustments, see how to fit it there. You're talking about it coming from the other direction of like, hey, we're going to put this in first, and then we layer the team on top of it. We can kind of solve the problem in a very different way because you're approaching it from that other end of the spectrum. Could you talk some about how that shaped those decisions, or what it was like to go through that? I mean, honestly, the entrepreneur in me, I'm like, I feel like you would just want to nerd out on the fact that going from that direction, I feel like would really, change the way you're going about things. It'd be interesting.
It definitely is. And legacy businesses that have been around for a long time have a very different challenge on their hands than companies that are native to the AI world. We don't have decades of legacy infrastructure that we have to migrate into a capacity where they could be, using AI best practices. But for us, I think at the end of the day, it becomes really more of a culture question, which is, I think, at the root of how teams are benefiting from and really struggling with the moment that we find ourselves in. We want every one of our teammates to have a learning mindset and a bias towards action. And that means when I finish my work at the end of my day, I'm thinking to myself, how could I have either done more in the time that I had, or done what I was going to do in less time? And that's not because we want to be faster. It's because we are ambitious and want to do more. And so I think there were some real fundamental investments that we made early on from a technology perspective that enabled us to be able to be much quicker with the adoption. But I would say the much bigger piece is the cultural piece of empowering every single person who works on this team to be an owner. What we're hearing more and more is that middle management is going to be something that is less and less relevant, because people are going to be able to manage themselves and they'll have more autonomy to do so. And so we're seeing everyone become way more productive. And the challenge for, I think, leaders right now is to try to communicate how to build a culture where AI is viewed as something that can make us all way more productive than something that is gonna threaten us in the way that the status quo has been perpetuated.
As a leader with that, how do you help to communicate your team around that efficiency and like trying to get better at the job without being like, hey, I'm trying to give you guys this way more work with it? Because I think that goes into like the paradox of productivity there, where it's like as we get more productive and more efficient, we get more work, and that can kind of create a really negative cycle for your team there. Now, I say all that because I think you're still doing the right thing. It's more of a communication problem at the end of the day. How do you communicate that to your team and making sure that they're having a healthy work-life balance and managing their life rather than just focusing on that efficiency aspect?
Well, the idea I think fundamentally is if we were hiring people who were motivated to come to work because they wanted to complete 10 tasks, and for every task that they were able to complete faster, there was another task assigned to them, this would be an incredibly depressing proposition, right? Because it would be a never-ending task list. So I empathize with the point because I would drive myself crazy if every time I finished a task in an organization faster, there was another one assigned to me. Mm-hmm. I think we tend to hire people that are motivated by impact. And so what we'll do is we'll tell people, this is where we are today and this is where we want to go. How do you want to build your path towards getting there? Help us make that happen. And so what we see is having the 10 tasks that you used to be able to do to work towards that goal now be something that you can do in half the time. Now, all of a sudden, you're doubling what you can do to reach that level of impact, which is why you're here in the first place. And so I think to answer your question specifically from a leadership perspective, you can't be preaching AI unless you're practicing it yourself. Like one of the first things that we did at our company, which we stole from a podcast, is we created a Slack channel called How I AI. And it's a place for people to share what they're learning, how they're approaching things, and what mistakes they're making along the way. Because there is a learning curve for figuring out how to do this. But the reality is that when you see that I'm in there posting about how I'm, turning calls that I've had into automatically written emails to someone based on my historical conversation with them using an integration, it's like, does anyone on our team enjoy doing that currently themselves manually? Like, of course not. Like, what if your job was not 30% kind of manual work, 70% inspirational work, but 1% manual work and 99% of the kind of work that you enter into your flow state? And that's, I think where the teams that are able to really leverage this new technology are able to have teammates who enjoy a lot more of their time because the stuff that you haven't enjoyed can be outsourced or done more quickly.
I love that that mindset shift in your culture of the impact based vice task list. Tony Robbins talks about that, and switching from here's my task list for today to here's the outcome I want to achieve. Similar thought process that you'd be amazed at how much more you can get done and enjoy getting it done when you look at things like that. Even the folks who have a task list and enjoy lining out those tasks. And
don't make me turn this camera and point at my chalkboard right there for my tasks. All right.
And you're the one who's like, oh, I need to go pull weeds in the garden. Oh, it's not on the list. Let me put it on the list now that I've got it done and write it off the list. Yes, there are folks like that. But if you switch to that outcome focus, the impact focus, as y'all refer to it in your culture, I think that is huge. Which also the culture that you're describing, and what I think is interesting, and I think this is it's the dichotomy of the tech, and you have a very touchy-feely client relationship, and those two are opposed. How do you manage that and continue to be so successful with growing the business?
I love the question, and it's one of the things that we're spending all of our time thinking about, which is, our product team has no shortage of bells and whistles that we want to layer into our product, right? We can now do image recognition. We can do video recognition. We can do, real-time computational analysis on people's vocal patterns in ways that can predict the onset of cognitive impairment. Like, just wild stuff. And our litmus test for everything that we built into the product is, will what we do with this investment lead to more customer love? Right? Will the thing that we're investing in now make our product more easy to use, more straightforward to understand, and ultimately more likely for someone to share their experience with someone else. And so that's been a really helpful framing for us as we think about what we want to go build. Because at the end of the day, when people are using our product, they feel like they are, they're really putting their trust in us to be able to support them through what is really a vulnerable experience for both the person who's sharing the stories, but also for the person who's asking for the stories to be shared. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of heart built into the product, and we spend a lot of time in our communication trying to remind people that, yes, we're a company that is approaching 1 million stories recorded. Yes, we're a company that's been on Shark Tank. Yes, we're a company that is hopefully going to be really successful. But at the end of the day, the DNA of this company is all about being able to help people do something that they tell us they want to do, and we're here for them and here to support them through every step of their journey. But it's a hard challenge. I appreciate you asking.
So did you have an engineer ask you when you said, "Hey, the customer love"? Did he say, "How do we measure that"? Did you have somebody come to you and say,
"Oh, of course, yeah"? Well, if it can't be measured, it's not worth doing.
There you go.
Yeah, it's not, and so then the question was, how do we measure customer love? And the engineer said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, then we definitely have to go figure that out." It was not an engineer; it was one of our customer support teammates.
Oh, really?
Yeah, who didn't disagree with the premise, but just wondered how we would actually instrument a way of measuring. And so we spent a bunch of time thinking about what would a product that is loved by customers feel like, and how would that manifest in a way where it could be measured. And so we have a variety of different ways throughout the customer journey where we're able to assess customer love. And when we're building something into the product, we're looking, do those numbers move up or do they move down? And if they move up, it stays. And if it moves down, it changes or gets cut.
You know, that actually brings me to what I was going to ask around that. Not measuring the love aspect there, but of the quality of the conversation, the quality of the answer. And because when we last talked, Charlie, one of the things we spent a lot of time talking about was the idea of asking better questions to get better answers. Dad, as much as we're joking about all this, I could think I've asked you a bunch of questions. They're probably crappy questions. I get a crappy answer. Those kind of things where it's hey, what was it like in school? It's it's fine. I play football. Cool. A crappy question gives you a crappy answer, right? What have you seen as far as progress and innovation in terms of the question asking aspect of it specifically, and trying to get slightly better, modifying the language, those little tiny tweaks to get those better answers out for folks and get that better outcome for people?
Yeah, so we were in the process of building a scientific advisory board to help us with specifically this question, pun intended, of how do we ask better questions. And so it turns out there's a lot of art and science to asking great questions. So we think about that from a cognitive perspective, how do you get someone who maybe has dementia that runs in their family or is showing early signs of Alzheimer's? How do you ask a question that gets someone who wouldn't otherwise be able to remember something to be able to recall it? And then we also worked with professional storytellers and interviewers who have asked tens of thousands of questions. And the thing that we asked them was, how do we both get people to, at the end of talking about a story, to feel good about what they have just shared? But perhaps more importantly, how do you get the family that's going to be in receipt of this story to feel moved by it? Right? What makes a good story? And what it turns out is that if what makes a great story is specificity and details that could be relevant to no other person than you. And so, one of the worst questions you can ask someone is tell me about your wedding day. Because for most people, what they'll say is words that could be said by anyone who got married. It was amazing. I'll never forget it. It was a lot of work going in, but it was so worth, we speak in generalities. But if I ask you, what was the most surprising moment of your wedding day? And why did it surprise you? Then all of a sudden we're zooming in, right? We're zooming in and we're moving towards details. And as it turns out, the most important question is not the opening question, it's the follow-up. And so what we've learned with our product is that being able to have an automated interviewing experience that asks a great question is not difficult. It just takes good questions. What is really hard, but incredibly important, is to be able to ask powerful follow-up questions in a automated virtual context. And so a big part of what we're doing with Remento is learning about our storytellers as they share stories and asking them follow-up questions that are the kinds of things that if you were speaking to the best interviewer in the world, they would ask you, that would lead you to an area where you would say, I was not planning on talking about this today. And when you hear someone who's being interviewed get to that territory, you can be pretty sure that was a good interview.
What are some, like, I guess I'm just coming to mind of like the tips or tricks or a specific aspect that like maybe you implement a little bit of, like you're meeting somebody and you ask questions a slightly different way. What are some aspects?
You're
like
talking
that?
to that next investor.
Yeah. Well, I would say two things. First is the same question doesn't work for everyone. Right. If I'm talking to someone who's 35 years old, it's very different than I'm talking to someone who's 75 years old and is in their 5th year of dementia and doesn't know where their keys were. Now, the irony is that we lose our memory backwards when we lose it. So the person who has dementia, who doesn't remember where their keys is, probably remembers the name of their elementary school teachers. Right. And so we can go there, but there are ways to get there that are very different than if you were talking to someone with more stable and sound memory. But generally, the answer is specificity and asking questions that lead people to share things that they haven't shared before. So our best question on the platform has been from the very beginning, what was your favorite room in your childhood home? And the reason for that is because it's simple, it's innocuous, it doesn't feel like a hard question, but it's almost certainly something that, Cam, if I was to ask you if you know your dad's favorite room in his childhood home, you would not have the slightest idea.
Yeah, 100%.
Am I right?
100%, yeah.
Yeah. And generally, it's a question that when people hear, they smile. And that's what both of you are doing. And that's generally is a good place to start, we find. And then you can work your way towards the questions that are maybe more reminiscent, or what some people would consider like harder questions to answer. But from our perspective, you'll work your way there. There's no need to start there. Start with the softballs and just get people talking and comfortable doing so.
Yeah, build that trust, right? Which really, I've got like 3 questions that are rolling around in my head that are.
I'll go on mute for a little while. You go ahead.
Off of this, but how has this process, this development for the product that your business is selling, helped you personally to be a better relationship guy, whether it's wife, friends, associates, whatever?
I appreciate you asking that question. There are different types of listening. There is a form of listening that is, being able to just repeat back what was said. There's a form of listening where you are synthesizing and processing in real time what someone has said so that you can find a way to insert what you want to say in a way that feels relevant. And then there's a form of listening where you are just fully engaged and immersed in what the person is saying and hearing them at their word, but also reading everything else that's going on, the context, their body language, the things they've said before, the things that are being said after. And, what I've reflected on in this journey is that, if you want to be an impactful leader or an impactful parent or spouse, like you really have to get to that depth of listening to be able to understand where someone's coming from. And so, this is something that I think we can all appreciate being important, but I think in the moments where I feel like I've been able to enter into that really deep state of listening and really hear people where they are, it's pretty unique to have someone be able to share with you a true and profound sense that they've heard you. And when you're able to do that well, it kind of catches people off guard. And so I found that it's not something that I'm able to do always, but when I have the kind of bandwidth to be able to get to that state, it can be really, really special.
And in this same, and this is kind of a little bit of left field, what I'm hearing is a great tool that, have you thought about how to hire people better using a similar model that you're using to get people to tell stories better?
No. But I like
pause the episode. We'll cut this out.
To be perfectly honest, the answer is no. But I really like that idea. We spend a lot of time thinking on our team about how do we hire people? Like, how would you actually track success in a role back to someone's ability to, in a 30-minute conversation, indicate that they'll be successful? And I think actually the thing that I've probably learned the most along this journey is that everything I thought would be a really positive and strong indicator is wrong. Like it really is. Like
people, that's what's wrong.
Yeah. Well, you walk out of a conversation with someone after 30 minutes, and if you feel really energized by them, or at least when I have, what I've come to realize is they're really good at selling themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's an incredibly important skill, but there's so much more to being successful in any of the different roles that we're hiring for than that. And so, there's so much unconscious bias that goes into why you would walk out of a meeting really, really liking someone. And so I think what I've really tried to do over the last couple of years is just realize that a lot of the things that I thought were important in one of those conversations are less important. And any chance I can actually get throughout an interview process to see how someone works, like how would they actually approach a challenge that we would be working on together, with the level of urgency that our team operates with the tools that we have access to, like how would they actually break that down? We try to do more of that, but yeah, Otis, to answer your question, no, I haven't thought about the storytelling piece. It's a good push.
That actually hints to one of the things I was thinking about, which is you mentioned with your advisory board and kind of looking at the science side to inspire your work there. I know you're an impact driven guy. So how are you looking to take that science or the data that y'all are building and kind of connect that loop back to the science side of like, hey, here is how we can take this interview process and make it better for hiring, or here's how we can bottle this up and connect it to these areas. What are some aspects like that you've seen?
Yeah, well, 100%. A couple of different things. One is I'm very interested to be able to prove in a research setting that the work that we're doing is having positive effect on storytellers who are using our product and their families. Mm-hmm. So we hear this constantly, that people who have moved a parent into an assisted living facility are feeling like they are less connected to them than they were before. And they worry that that lack of connection will lead to that person feeling more isolated, perhaps more lonely. Maybe that loneliness leads to depression. And so we hear anecdotally all the time that when people go through this act of sharing a story with their family every week, and that family gets involved and shares feedback with them, and it becomes this really beautiful kind of like full family affair. Mm-hmm. Things like feelings of connection with your family and loneliness and depression all change. And so I'm very eager on the science side to be able to measure that. Because I think it matters, and I think being able to measure something that matters can be really effective. To your point, though, we have so much data that we're collecting about how stories are told, how people tell stories, how people tell better stories, what kinds of stories are appreciated and enjoyed most by family. And the hope would be that someone who comes to us and says, I don't know why my story matters, I wouldn't even know where to begin, has an experience that feels more like a coaching experience of how to tell your best story than one where they're being interrogated about their life. And to have that experience be driven by all of the things that we've been able to learn through the millions of stories of people that have come before them, always in a way that is entirely private, with your privacy being paramount at our company. But there's a lot that we can learn from this data set as it relates to what stories matter most, and how can we tell stories that will ultimately be most meaningful for your family.
We've used the word, and we were fortunate enough to have our good friend Cher, romance novel writer, on the show last week. And, we talked a lot about the story arc. What have you learned about storytelling that arc and doing that to help people share their stories so that people want to hear it?
Yeah. I always want to start with a moment, a specific time. And the best stories are ones that happen in moments of transition, right? So getting married, having a baby, changing jobs. These are the moments where our identity is sometimes put in question, and they often lead to clarification of who we are and what we want to be and how we want to live our life. And so I always want to start with a specific moment in as much detail as possible. It's one of the reasons why photographs can be really powerful with anchoring someone to a specific time in life. And then what I want to hear is, why does that moment matter? Like, if you're asked a question and it leads you to share something very specific, let's say about your wedding day, right? Like, what can I learn from that? What did you learn from that? What can others learn from that experience? How did that experience shape you? And for some people, they've never been asked that before. So hearing them think about it in real time it's It's really fun to watch. But ultimately, if you can start with something specific and then kind of like extrapolate from there, why is that moment relevant to someone who's learning about you? Let's imagine 100 years from now. That arc tends to be really, really impactful as it relates to kind of like an autobiographical memory.
You kind of hint to something, and actually we hinted at it a few different times, talking about getting these stories out of people. There's this thing we talk about in terms of like leadership, of like the value of like the reluctant leader. Sometimes I think there's a very similar kind of thing when it comes to like storytelling or authors. Of it's like the person who's most excited to share their story might be a little bit more full of themselves, might be more ego than the person who is hesitant to tell that story. What has your experience been with that? Been with that, and like have you seen that play out true? Or do you think there's a little bit more nuance to it?
Well, the dichotomy of the two different personas is spot on. We talk about generally there being two different types of storytellers with our product. The first is people who, when they receive Remento as a gift, their response is, "It's about damn time you asked me to tell my stories. Why is this taking so long?" And the second group of people will say something along the lines of, "I'm not sure why you got this for me." What about my life is something that either you or others would want to preserve, little old me. And to your point, the reality is that you don't have to have been an innovator or a trailblazer or an inventor or a politician to have your story matter to your family. And so a big part of the journey is helping people who are thinking to themselves, "I'm not sure why I would do this," help them understand why this matters. Telling them like, what would you be interested in hearing your great, great, great grandfather speak about how he got to school? Like, would that be interesting? Do you think there's something you could learn about yourself from that experience? And the answer is obviously yes. And so a big part of what we're trying to do is enlighten people about how sharing your story is one of the greatest gifts you could give your family, whether you understand that or not, and whether they understand that or not today. Because one day there will be a day where they will come to understand just how important that is. And so, to your point, Cam, these are two very different groups. In our experience, one group tends to talk a lot more at the beginning, but we see very little correlation with that second group once they get started speaking for any less time than the first.
I want to just hit something there because I think this is really subtle. Maybe it's just something I'm catching, but the difference of like thinking about it in terms of family history versus like I'm selling a story, I think is a really key difference with that. If it's not the Camden stories getting out there and all these folks are going to hear it. No, this is for my daughter and her kids. Like, and I think reframing it like that is such an important piece there. Yeah.
There's been a lot of research specifically among young kids as it relates to resilience. Like what are the experiences, attributes, family dynamics that ultimately lead to resilience? And there's a really famous study done in the early 2000s that proved that one of the things that if you care about your kids being resilient, you can do for them that matters more than just about anything else is helping them understand their family history. Understand that their family has overcome challenges. They have faced challenges and overcome them. Don't just focus on the great things that your family has done, but talk about the moments when life got difficult and how the family persevered. And knowing that you've come from a lineage where people have had to do hard things, can be a really impactful way of making sure that when hard things inevitably face your kids, they know that they can address whatever's coming at them.
Yeah, hard things like walking uphill both ways through the snow all year round to get to school.
The AI cuts that out because it's in every story, Dad. Charlie just cuts that out right off the bat.
Does the AI sniff out my BS? Is that what you're saying?
No way. No, we make it even better.
I got enough BS. I don't need a whole lot of fluff there.
I should add, there's no fact checking whatsoever. Yeah. It's just your words, just rewritten in a way.
God, that would be funny. Put it at the end of the book there, like, hey, by the way, these things are wrong. This is made up.
Like after every presidential speech or whatever.
Yeah, the fact checking. Yeah, it was funny. We got feedback from some oral historians at the very beginning saying this product will never work because none of this is actually verifiable. And like my question was like, why does that matter? She goes, well, it's not an oral history if it's not verifiable. And the answer was, I guess we're not doing oral histories. Then we should just be capturing memories.
There you go. Scratch that title out, right?
Fine by me.
Yeah. one thing I find I really want you to share is how, as the entrepreneur, the idea founder, who's passionate about sharing these stories, manage the business, and how are you doing that?
I really appreciate that question as well. I spend a lot of my time telling the story of our company, and it's my favorite part of my job. And I get to speak a lot about my experience, and I get to talk about why we built the company in the way that we did. And I find that storytelling is really helpful. I also spend a lot of time working with our team to try to make sure that we are setting really ambitious goals and reaching them every day across every dimension. And so the thing that I have found to be most helpful is finding amazing people that are mission aligned, that care about the impact that we're trying to drive, setting really clear goals about where we're trying to get, and then trusting them to be able to get us from where we are today to where we want to be. And that is incredibly difficult for someone who believes and cares as much as I do, and has such specific opinions about how I think we ought to get there. And so it's taken a lot of work on my part to feel comfortable actually delegating, because that is not something that's always come naturally to me. But it's the only way to be able to scale myself, to scale our business, to scale our mission, and ultimately the vision. So that's been a learning journey for me. But I couldn't have built this product or this team or this entire thing by myself. That was never on the table. There's no amount of AI that will ever make that possible. I both don't have the bandwidth, and I also don't have the skill sets in each of these different functions. So hiring excellent people and making sure they have clarity about how to get to where we need to get, giving them autonomy to do so, that's worked really well.
Do you have somebody on the team that checks you? You know, in the military world, the sergeant major, the first sergeant, who kind of taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, let's go outside and talk for a second." You have to be able to take care of you that way?
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah, I've got my co-founder and our CTO, Alex, and I have been in it from the very beginning, and he's very comfortable having very honest conversations with me, and I value those greatly. I also have a board whose job is to check me every month when we meet. So I've got some good checks and balances, and yeah, those are always really well appreciated.
I could tell you've had that conversation a couple of times.
Oh yeah. My skin is about an inch thicker than it was when I started all of this.
Yeah, them calluses are building up in places you didn't think you need them, would you?
That's exactly right.
Oh man, you know, and calluses are lessons learned, and you know, for me, I'd heard it before, but you know, memory fades. The Einstein quote of spend 90% of your time defining the problem and 10% solving it. I think that. You know, I'm thinking of a couple of guys in the Steelmen tribe, Camden, that need to spend a few more minutes on defining the problem. But when they hear this, hopefully they know that that shoe's fitting them. That is so true, because then you know where to put the effort and how to fix it.
Yeah.
Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
I got a twofer here, which was just one on Charlie. You mentioned, and I feel like I'd heard this, but that dementia, you lose your memory backwards. And I feel like that I must have heard that at some point, but I kind of had this like, oh, duh, that makes so much more sense in the context of the disease there. But then the other one on the lighter side there is, Charlie, your answer to that last question, I think, proves that AI will not replace entrepreneurs, at least yet. We got another 10 years at least. You can't build it all by yourself there. So we are safe for a little bit longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Charlie, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
Well, in addition to learning about your weird fixation with needing everything to be straight in your house, which Otis, you and I share that fixation, I would say just being able to speak with you guys, 3 years after our first conversation, just the importance of pausing in your life to reflect on all of the wonderful things that have happened to you is something that, in a really fast moving society that just, isn't slowing down, it's just really important to pause and make time and reflect on all of the blessings in life. So that's something that I'm feeling very acutely coming out of this conversation.
Awesome.
I got to make a little bit of fun of you, Charlie, because I've had a feeling I'd heard that before, and the title of the previous episode was Pause is Powerful. So you're consistent, man.
Man, hopefully you are remembering that more than every 3 years.
Yeah.
Charlie, how do folks find you, learn more about what you got going on, and look up and learn more about Remento?
So I'm most active on LinkedIn, Charlie Greene. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you're interested. And if you want to check out Remento, it's again like Remember and Memento. Check out our website. You can view us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're everywhere. And Remento makes a really great gift, either for a parent or grandparent, or for you to buy for your kids to be able to give them something for the future. So if you've got stories to tell or know someone that does, we'd love to help make that process of capturing them a little bit easier.
Awesome. Charlie, thank you again for taking some time out to hang out with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam Noticed, and a special thanks to our guest, Charlie Greene, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.